Hey there everybody, I hope you're doing well. It's been a while since the video, hasn't it? But I got some great news at the start of May. My wrist has fully healed from my skating accident back in October of last year, so I've been able to get back to skateboarding, obviously wearing protectors, but I digress. I don't really want to divert the video from its actual topic, which is a question that a friend asked recently, is that have I noticed whether retro video game prices have increased or not here in Japan since I moved here 3 years ago? And the simple answer to that is yes, they have. But I think there's a little bit more to it than that. So if you've got the time, why not listen to hear my thoughts on that subject? So first of all, I am not a value collector. The only value that I place on games is that I like them. I enjoy them. I love them. I want to play them, that kind of stuff. Financially, if I see a game that I want to buy, it's at the right price, the condition is agreeable to me and all the rest of it, then I buy it. It's worth the price that I pay for it. It's as simple as that. But one of the things that people often sort of don't really sort of explain about why, it might matter whether Japanese retro video game prices have increased or not, is that, well, why does it matter? I mean, if you live in, say, Canada, what does it matter whether prices have gone up here or not? Well, there's two simple reasons for this. The underlying all of it is that for some people, buying Japanese imports was a way of getting great games for a much lower price than you will pay for their Western published counterparts. So, for example, maybe you want to buy a game like Axelay for your Super Nintendo. Maybe historically it's been cheaper to buy the Japanese version than it has been to pick up the Western published equivalent. But of course, obviously, if those prices in Japan are increasing and maybe even making parity with the prices with the Western counterparts, actually, is it worth buying the Japanese import? So there's that underlying it. And the reason this might matter is because you might be somebody who buys import games off of eBay and notice the prices increasing, or perhaps you're thinking of, coming to Japan either to live and work, and maybe you are a retro video gamer like me and you want to do a bit of shopping every now and then. Or maybe, more importantly, you're thinking of taking a vacation here in Japan, and one of the big components of your trip is to buy retro video games. And if the prices have increased so much, begin to wonder, well, is it actually worth paying all that money for the flights, the hotels, the food, and all this kind of stuff, if you're going to end up spending just as much as you would do if you stayed at home? Now, I would argue that any travel and vacation is definitely worth it, regardless of what shopping you're doing. The experiences that you can gain from travelling the world are way beyond all of those kinds of considerations, if you ask me. But I digress. So that's the reason people, I think, are interested. So I have divided this up into a couple of ways of explaining it. So, or more than a couple, but let's go for it. So first, are there bargains still to be had out there? Absolutely. The thing that you need to do is have time and patience on your side. Now, that's difficult if you're coming here on a vacation. But for example, this Game Boy Pocket, I bought this in Suragaya in Nagoya a week ago on my birthday, and it was in the junk bin. I pretty much knew immediately that it would be a very simple fix, because these things are pretty bulletproof, and the screen was in really good condition, so the screen lens isn't so much, and the rest of the case could do with a damn good clean. But I was fairly certain that the battery terminals just needed a damn good clean-up. And that's exactly what it was. And I paid 2,100 yen for this. Easily a fantastic bargain. So, not too bad. Not as good as the Game Boy that I first got here when I first came to Japan, which is still inside this modded unit. But I don't want to go into exactly what I paid for each individual item 3 years ago, but bargains are still out there. You just got to look for them. If you go into the major stores like your Super Potatoes and maybe Suragaya to an extent, and all these other well-known stores in heavily trafficked areas like Akihabara in Tokyo and Akamon in Nagoya, for example, and Osaka and so forth, yeah, you're going to pay more. So keep your eyes peeled. Next, some people on YouTube say that, well, Japan has been picked over. All the good stuff has now gone. And I think there's only one reason those statements kind of exist, and that's basically to just create clickbait for YouTube. It's frankly bollocks. There are so many copies of these games sold here in Japan that I still think that there are plenty enough copies of the games that people actually do want to play out there if you look for them. So Japan has not been picked over. yes, if you perhaps go to Akihabara again, you're probably going to find that, yeah, it probably does look a little bit threadbare at times. But then, if you're going to throw yourself into basically the mecca of retro gaming as it's known outside of Japan, what do you expect? I mean, yes, it's true, you could go to an, out of the way book-off store and find absolutely nothing there apart from a sun-faded copy of Excite Stage at an exorbitant price. But on the other hand, you can sometimes go to a hard-off store in a slightly more provincial city and score some amazing bargains. So they are still out there. So Japan has not been picked over. So that being said, I only collect for the Super Famicom or Super Nintendo as it's known outside of Japan and the Game Boy here in Japan. So let me go into a little bit more detail about the price trends that I've noticed for these systems. So let's talk about a staple game. This is Super Mario World. I don't think it needs any introduction. You're going to find staple games like this have not really overly increased in value that much in the last 3 years or so. You can find this game all day long, boxed in really good condition for about 2,000 yen, and that's pretty much held true for the whole time I've been here in Japan, whether that was up in the rural sticks of Iwate Prefecture or down here in Mie Prefecture where I now live. I visited stores here in Nara, in Aichi, in Kyoto Prefecture, and yeah, I found this game and things like Super Mario Kart, F-Zero, Pilot Wings, Star Fox, those kinds of caliber of games are all pretty much at the same prices that they were when I first came here, and they're all very affordable compared to their Western counterparts. And let's face it, 2,000 yen for an amazing game like Super Mario World is worth it all day long. So fear not, it's all out there for you. The next type of game that I want to talk about is games like Super Tetris 2 with Bomb Bliss. Now this is a game that you're going to find all day long, up and down Japan, no trouble whatsoever. And these are fantastically good games. I mean, it's Tetris for heaven's sake, with Bomb Bliss, which I also really like. And at the end of the day, these are games that sold extremely well when they were new, and so they're plentiful out there. And these games have not increased any real sense of the meaning of the word since I came to Japan. I actually bought this game a couple of months ago in Kyoto Prefecture in Kizugawa. It was just like a one-off second-hand store that's there. And basically, I paid about 900 yen for this with tax. And that's pretty much the value of this game for the whole time that I have been in Japan. I've seen this game so often, I thought, it's about time I picked that up, because I do love Tetris, and this is a really fantastic version of it. So why not? So your really good games that are two a penny, and perhaps, not the games that everybody talks about on YouTube, you're still going to find these for just the same price that they were 3 years ago. So well worth it and great bargains. So now let's talk about another type of game, which is the staple game, but ones that are really highly sought after. Things like Super Castlevania 4 or Akumajo Dracula as it's known here in Japan. Now when I first came to Japan, box complete copies of this game were in a region of about 5,500 yen with the tax. But I've noticed recently that this game can go for as much as 10 to 11,000 yen in good condition. Now that is quite a marked increase, and I think one of the reasons that's driving these price increases is because people remember fantastic games like this. They're now getting to our kind of age and they think, oh yeah, that was a really good game. I'm going to go and get myself a Super Famicom and a copy of Super Castlevania 4. Because the issue with that is that, there is a scarcity of these games to start with, and of course the price begins to increase as the supply goes down. Exactly the same as what's happened outside of Japan. So there's nothing new there. But also I believe that this is a game that you can play with basically not a lick of Japanese. You can figure it out. Yes, there is some Japanese text in here, but it's not really going to spoil your enjoyment of the game. So this is a game which people from the West have been more than happy to pick up when they come to Japan, or to purchase through third-party proxy bidding sites that allow access to Yahoo auctions outside of Japan. So I think that has been somewhat responsible for gradually increasing the price of these games. For example, I paid about 6,000 yen for my copy delivered, but yeah, in most stores that I see this game at now, in the kind of condition that this is, which is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's good enough. It's good. You're looking at about 8,500 yen. So some games like your Contras, your Legend of Zeldas, Link to the Past, Super Metroid, those kinds of caliber of games, those have increased in value somewhat, but still probably cheaper than their Western published counterparts. And then we get on to my last category of games, which are the super sought after games wherever you are in the world. This one is Kiki Kai Kai Nazo no Kuromanto, or Pocky and Rocky as it's known in the West. And this one is Kirby no Kira Kira Kizu, known as Kirby Star Stackers outside of Japan. Both fantastic games, both sought after, both by people here in Japan and obviously by people outside of Japan, but they have different reasons for holding great value, apart from obviously sharing the fact that they're both fantastic games. This Pocky and Rocky was around about 20,000 yen when I first came here to Japan, and that I would consider a fairly expensive game 3 years ago for the Super Famicom. There were more expensive ones out there, don't get me wrong, but that was a fairly high ticket item. And one of the reasons that this particular game is quite expensive is because the ink that they use for this red colour is really susceptible to UV damage, i.e. it gets faded by sunlight really easily, making this box quite unsightly, and that does obviously affect the value. Now, as long as the box is acceptable for me, I'm not too bothered about that, but for some people it does. But I've noticed that even really crappy quality copies of this particular game are now 25-30,000 yen, and you're probably looking somewhere between 55 and 60,000 yen for a really good copy of this game if you're willing to get price gouged at places like Super Potato. But otherwise, half decent copies of this game are somewhere between about 35 and 40,000 here in Japan now. I actually paid 30,000 yen for my copy. It's complete with the manual and everything. The box is in perfectly okay condition. It's got a few little dings on it, but there's no actual fading, so that's my main criteria fulfilled. But that was from a private seller in Osaka, so yeah. So you're still going to be paying quite a bit for games like Pocky and Rocky. And then the other type of sought after game, get the game box the right way up, is a game that was never released outside of Japan. This was only on the Game Boy outside of Japan, so the Super Nintendo or Super Famicom version only exists here in Japan. And it's rare because of that, because this only came out in the middle of 1999. I mean, that's crazy. I'd left school by that stage. I was 16 years old and got my first proper paying job after leaving school. So that gives you a bit of an idea of how late in the day that this game was. But this has always been a sought after game, not just because it's good, it also features Kirby, which, of course, Kirby is going to drive up the value. And, yeah, it's relatively rare. Loose, you can buy this game all day long for about 7,000 yen in half decent condition. But boxed, you was always looking at spending somewhere in the region of about 30,000 yen for this game. But I've noticed recently on Yahoo auctions that this game would sell for around about 40,000 yen in good condition, with all the requisites such as the Kira Kira seal, which is like a holographic, sort of fancy sticker, and the manual, for example. My particular copy cost me, again, very similar to Pocky and Rocky, 30,000 yen. So the fact that I love this game makes it worth that for me. I just love puzzle games. I'm that kind of gamer. But anyway, regardless, I saw a copy of this which I believe would have been bought from a third-party proxy bidding service that was admittedly in stunningly good condition. I mean, it was literally perfect. It had everything. But that sold for a whopping 86,000 yen. That's almost triple what I paid for this game. And yeah, it's insane, isn't it? That is just so much money. So yeah, I do believe that the third-party proxy bidding sites are gradually pushing up the overall value of Japanese retro video games, particularly online, because obviously people from Japan will be competing with bids from outside of the country. And of course, if you look at the price of something like Pocky and Rocky, maybe it does make sense to buy it here in Japan, because you're still going to be making a saving. Although I do believe that this is a game now where the price differential is becoming so small, maybe you're better off hanging out for that Western published copy if you can find one. But there you go. And then let's go on to the Game Boy. So the Game Boy is a system that I don't feel that has seen a great deal of price increase over the time I've been here in Japan. I bought this particular copy of Twinbee Da yesterday. It's a game that I've seen all day long for the last 3 to 4 years for about 500 yen. In fact, that's pretty much exactly what I paid for this copy. And yeah, I'd say that Game Boy is still relatively cheap to buy for here in Japan, and all of your staples will be very, very affordable. Of course, your more rare games like your Vanishing Racers, your Painter Momo Pies, what other rare games can I think of for the Game Boy? I can't think of any others off the top of my head. I apologise. Yes, they're still going to be expensive. But some of the more mid-tier games, I have noticed a little bit of an uptick in those prices. Things like DuckTales 2, for example, which has a fantastic port on the Game Boy. Bionic Commando, for example. Even the Rockman World games have slightly increased in value here in Japan since I've been here. But I'm not reading too much into that, because I do think that some of those price differentials are because I scored particularly good bargains on those games. So Game Boy, I still feel, is well worth collecting for here in Japan, because you're going to get some really fantastically priced games for that system here. And the last system that I want to talk about is the PC Engine. So I have my PC Engine here. It's one of my most dear consoles that I was only very recently, relatively speaking, in the last 4 years or so, 4 or 5 years, introduced to, and I have grown to love it deeply. It's just seriously one of the most fantastic consoles. And believe it or not, for a system that was basically the second best selling system here in Japan for a while, the games for the PC Engine, and also by extension the Super CD-ROM system, the CD-ROM-ROM system, if you can call it a system, or standard or whatever, those have always been expensive here in Japan, certainly for as long as I've been here, which is not the longest period of time, but PC Engine games have always been expensive here. They have never been cheap, and they have only increased in value even more. But bargains can still be had. So one of the reasons that I don't buy games for the PC Engine is because I have the SD system free from Terrarion. But here's a copy of Outrun. Now, this is an exception to the rule, because I can now say that this is the second PC Engine game that I have. I have R-Type, the first Hue card, which contains the first 4 stages, and now Outrun. And this is a wonderful port of this classic arcade racer from Sega. And generally speaking, you're looking at spending around about 6,000 to 7,000 yen for a good condition boxed copy of Outrun for the PC Engine. And I've been looking out for it for a while, because it's a game that I did want a copy for. And you can see that mine came with a little plastic thing that the Hue card goes into. You can see that nobody's written their name on the back there. Even the little bit of foam that went between it, and the manual is in great condition. And if I can actually weasel this out without too much trouble, there we go. Inside, there's even a little postcard, the Hagaki, to send back to NEC Avenue to give your opinions on the game and join their mailing list, which I'll pop in the post tomorrow. But yeah, this is about a 6,000 to 7,000 yen game, but with a bit of patience, in a slightly out of the way book-off branch down here in the west of Japan where I now live, I found this for 2,700 yen with the tax. How amazing is that? So bargains are out there. You've just got to have the time, and with that the patience to look around. Now, one area of games which I don't think has increased in value too much, and gives credence to my opinions that I think that proxy services on the internet are overall driving up the prices on places like Yahoo auctions, is RPGs and other text-heavy games. And there's such a simple reason for that. I mean, unless you're fluent or can read Japanese, really you're going to get such limited interest or value out of a game like Final Fantasy VI or Chrono Trigger, for example. I mean, yes, you probably can work your way around it, but the whole point of an RPG, particularly as one as good as, say, as Chrono Trigger, is the story. And if you can't read that, well, you're missing out on a hell of a lot. So prices for JRPGs have generally stayed at the level which they were before, and that to me gives credence to my theory that it's actually these third-party proxy bidding sites that are gradually increasing the value of retro games here in Japan. But no, Japan has not been picked over. There is still many, many wonderful bargains to be had out there if you come here for your vacation or you come to live and work here. I mean, that's part of the thrill of it, isn't it? Is wandering into that little mom and pop second-hand store or that book-off store that doesn't look very promising from the outside, and then you find a little bit of treasure dug away or tucked away at the back there. That's part of the fun, isn't it? Sometimes in this is, finding that copy of bizarrely, I picked up a copy of NHL 94 because it's meant to be a really good pick up and play multiplayer sports game that even for people who don't like ice hockey enjoy. And that's SNES Drunk who told me that, and I took him at his word for it because I found a copy of that in Book Off in Suzuka City for 290 yen or thereabouts with the tax. So yeah, and that was usually a 2,000 yen unboxed game. So, and that was just all through digging through the racks. So it is worth digging through. Anyway, it's getting dark now. I hope the picture is held out in this video because God knows I've struggled to make a video for a while. But I hope you found that interesting. And if you've got any questions, be sure to throw them down in the comments below. And likewise, if you've got any opinions about what I've said, feel free to also throw them down there. But otherwise, that's it for now. I hope you're all keeping well, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Peace.